Most men are not defeated on the battlefield with swords drawn and enemies in sight. They collapse in quiet rooms, wrapped in warm sheets, with someone whispering love into their ears while stripping them of direction. They don't fall to violence, they fall to softness that slowly corrodes their backbone. The war outside was never their undoing. It was the unspoken, invisible war inside, the war of identity, of boundaries, of vision, that brought them to their knees. And when they lose that inner fight, there is no funeral, no elegy, no songs sung in their name. The world doesn't stop. It doesn't pity a man who hands over his strength piece by piece in exchange for fleeting affection. It simply erases him, efficiently, silently, like he never mattered. His spark is not extinguished by steel, but by softness disguised as sanctuary. Not by conquest, but by kisses that confuse him. The woman who claimed to nurture his heart gradually became the quiet architect of his erosion. She didn't scream, she didn't rage. She smiled. She nurtured just enough to keep him tame and took just enough to keep him weak. He doesn't realize he's been conquered, because she never raised a weapon. Just her presence, her stories, her subtle rewrites of reality. And where were his protectors? Nowhere. His mother loved him, but her love had blind spots. She never warned him that love without wisdom is dangerous. His friends, equally disarmed, had fallen in the same traps and could only offer silence. And society, it cashed in on his downfall. The world profits from the broken man, the one who's too emotionally dependent to lead, too distracted to build, too drained to fight back. It feeds him illusions, hands him fairy tales wrapped in desire, and markets dysfunction as soulmates. They don't call it manipulation. They call it fate. They call it love. But what it really is slow annihilation wrapped in warmth. It's not the blade that pierces the skin, it's the perfume that sedates the mind. And by the time he wakes up, if he ever does, he is no longer the man he was. He's a ghost wearing his own smile. A shell that once carried potential, now repurposed into someone else's story. Machiavelli didn't offer wisdom for men hoping to be cherished. He didn't comfort the sentimental or coddle the romantic. His words were forged in the fires of political reality, written not with ink but with blood, betrayal, and the unflinching clarity of a man who understood power to its core. He didn't craft verses to be read under moonlight, he sculpted strategies meant to be wielded in the shadows. His writings weren't for the man who seeks warmth above wisdom. They were for the man who sees the world not as it should be, but as it is. A world where every move is calculated. Every embrace has consequence. Every alliance carries risk. He didn't speak to boys hoping to be rescued by affection. He spoke to sovereigns who knew that even love could be a dagger hidden behind a smile. He understood what most men never do, that affection can be political, that intimacy is often strategic, and that the wrong emotional entanglement can reduce a king to a pawn without ever drawing blood. In his world, and in this one, every woman who enters your life is not just a lover, she is a variable in your empire. A force, for or against. Not because women are inherently destructive or divine, but because they are powerful. And unchecked power, no matter how beautiful, can end dynasties. Machiavelli knew the brutal truth. A man who rules must be more than charismatic. He must be clear. Clear about his values. Clear about his mission. Clear about the cost of distraction disguised as love. Because in the cold math of survival, the woman beside you is either reinforcing your foundation or silently loosening the stones beneath your feet. She either sharpens your sword or dulls it with flattery. She either walks beside your purpose or seduces you away from it with comfort disguised as care. Machiavelli didn't frame love as a sanctuary, he framed it as a battlefield. One where the stakes were not just hearts, but legacies. Because he knew that men do not fall by accident. They fall by miscalculation. And the most dangerous calculation of all is to forget that charm can be a weapon and that the cost of trusting the wrong woman is not merely heartbreak, it is history forgetting you ever mattered at all. The surface deceives, always. The most dangerous enemies do not scream, they smile. The lips that softly whisper encouragement may be rehearsing a betrayal behind the mask of affection. The arms that wrap around you like sanctuary may be measuring the weight of your downfall. And while the undisciplined man is easily moved by softness, by seduction, by the melody of charm, the discerning man trains his eyes beyond the illusion. He does not study the act, he studies the echo beneath the act. He pays attention to silence, to tone shifts, to moments when the mask slips. He doesn't get distracted by the sparkle of attention, he reads the cold logic behind it. He watches not what she says when you are winning, but how she reacts when you're losing. Not how she responds when doors open, but what she does when they close. He listens to the laughter, yes, but more importantly, to its timing, its purpose, its emptiness. He observes the tension in her stillness, the calculation behind her support, the way her eyes follow opportunity like a compass. Because character is not proven in desire, it's revealed in delay. Love is not measured in how loud she praises your purpose, it's in how she holds her tongue when you disappoint her. When your no sets boundaries, does she honor it or resent it? When your mission takes the spotlight, does she cheer or quietly compete? For a woman's loyalty is not in how well she flatters your strength, but in how she respects your solitude. In how she responds when your attention turns inward, when your growth no longer orbits her needs. The wise man knows that people are rarely what they present, especially when desire clouds judgment. And so he watches not the performance, but the patterns. The pauses between words. The shifts in energy when you're no longer useful. Because the same voice that calls you king today may whisper mutiny tomorrow. Not because she changed, but because your usefulness did. And the man who fails to see this is not betrayed by her. He is betrayed by his blindness. There are only two kinds of women a man must concern himself with: those who fortify his vision like stone pillars beneath a temple, and those who erode it grain by grain while calling it love. The modern world, desperate to avoid truth, will sell you comforting lies. She's evolving, she's misunderstood, be patient, she just needs healing. But these soft narratives are the very opium that sedates a man while his purpose rots beneath him. Ambiguity is not compassion, it's corrosion. Because the most lethal woman is not the one who comes with knives drawn and malice declared. No, it's the one wrapped in elegance, gentleness, and a carefully rehearsed fragility that bends your instincts until you can no longer tell the difference between service and self-destruction. She doesn't sabotage your life by storming through it, she rearranges your mind, one thread at a time. She aligns herself just enough to seem supportive, but not enough to actually carry weight. She whispers just enough sweetness to silence your suspicion, while quietly severing your ties to clarity, discipline, and solitude. She doesn't demand you abandon your path, she simply asks you to pause it for now. And so you do. One small compromise becomes a habit. One delay becomes a detour. You start trading your edge for peace, your mission for moments, and before long, the fire you were born to carry dims in her shadow. She doesn't steal your power with force, she seduces it out of you. Not with threats, but with softness. Not with anger, but with emotional hooks disguised as intimacy. She shares tales of her broken past, her wounds, her fears, not to connect, but to bind you. To awaken the part of you that longs to protect, to fix, to rescue. And unless you've mastered your craving for affection, unless you've trained your psyche to endure the ache of being unloved, you will mistake her emotional gravity for loyalty. You'll call the manipulation depth. You'll name the entanglement devotion. And all the while, your kingdom will be crumbling beneath your feet. Because ruin rarely announces itself with chaos. It often arrives gently, wearing your favorite perfume. It speaks softly, calls you its world, and asks you to stay a little longer, just until she heals. But healing becomes a leash. And by the time you realize you're no longer steering your life, the wreckage is too deep to climb out without bleeding. The truth is brutal but necessary. If a woman is not sharpening your purpose, she is softening it. If she's not igniting your discipline, she's dulling it. And if she's not demanding the man in you rise, she is lulling him to sleep. There is no neutral force in the life of a man with a mission. Every presence is either fuel or fire. Choose accordingly. This isn't misogyny. It's realism in its most sobering form. To name a danger is not to hate it, but to refuse blindness. Machiavelli never wrote to make men bitter, he wrote to make them sovereign. He wasn't calling for war against women, he was preparing men for the war within themselves. The man who lacks clarity isn't just vulnerable, he's already halfway conquered. He's the man who mistakes emotional dependency for love, who bows in gratitude while his purpose is being stripped away thread by thread. He doesn't see the difference between devotion and submission. He calls his loss of direction compromise and brands his spiritual decay as maturity. Such a man doesn't fall loudly. He erodes quietly. Not in one great collapse, but through daily, silent agreements that chip away at his strength. He tells himself he's choosing peace when he's really choosing paralysis. He says he's being supportive, when in truth, he's being siphoned. The woman hasn't shackled him, she doesn't have to. He hands her the keys. Slowly, voluntarily. In exchange for validation, affection, and the illusion of being understood. And as she becomes the center of his world, he loses the coordinates to his own. He forgets the rituals that once made him powerful. His discipline, his ambition, his solitude, replaced with endless emotional negotiations and soul-level fatigue. He begins orbiting her moods, scheduling his energy around her expectations, living in a castle she controls with invisible strings. And the tragedy? He thinks it's love. He believes his suffering is noble, that his sacrifice is sacred. But love that costs a man his essence is not love, it is servitude. It is spiritual subjugation disguised as connection. By the time he realizes he has abandoned his mission, his fire, and his voice, he is often so entangled that leaving feels like betrayal. Not of her, but of the self he buried for her approval. He doesn't just forget who he is. He forgets that he was ever meant to remember. And that's what Machiavelli warned against, not women, but blindness. Not affection, but addiction to false peace. Because when a man loses the ability to see clearly, he won't need chains. He'll build the prison himself and call it home. But there are always signs. Even when the mask is flawless, the energy betrays the intention. You see it not just in what she says, but in what she allows. How she treats your boundaries is not just a reflection of her character, it's a forecast of your future. Does she respect your solitude or invade it with need? Does she lean into your leadership or challenge it with disguised defiance? A good woman doesn't compete with your discipline, she harmonizes with it. She sees your structure not as a threat, but as protection. She adapts, not out of submission, but because she values alignment over control. But the woman who seeks possession doesn't crave harmony, she craves dominance masked as love. She doesn't want to build with you, she wants to build you in her image. She'll insist on your strength when it serves her, then shame it when it resists her manipulation. She'll redefine your virtues as vices. Your standards will become arrogance. Your boundaries will be emotional distance. Your clarity will be labeled harsh. And slowly, you begin to bend. Not out of fear, but out of confusion. Because love is supposed to feel good, right? So why does protecting your purpose now feel like betrayal? It's because the chaos has begun its seduction, not in fire, but in fog. You don't see your collapse, you feel it as peace. Her influence doesn't storm the gates of your life, it dissolves them gently, replacing your instincts with hesitation, your vision with doubt. You stop saying what you believe, you stop doing what you know is right, not because she commands it, but because you now second-guess yourself. That's the true danger. When you start editing your soul to preserve a bond, when you reduce your fire just enough to keep her warmth, and this erosion is not loud, it's quiet, civilized, even romantic, it's late-night talks laced with guilt, it's subtle accusations wrapped in concern, it's passive disapproval when you choose purpose over comfort. She doesn't silence you, she makes you silence yourself, not with threats, but with emotion, not with chains, but with stories, until one day, You look in the mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. He's polite, he's agreeable, he's emotionally available, but he's no longer dangerous, no longer focused, no longer free. Just a well-trained version of who he used to be. And that, precisely, is the design, because chaos cannot command a man who knows who he is, so it convinces him to forget. Machiavelli once warned, "He who seeks to deceive will always find someone who allows himself to be deceived." And in those few words lies the hidden tragedy of countless men, not in being lied to, but in choosing the lie because it feels safer than truth. This isn't about turning her into the villain of your story. It's about exposing the silent pact you made with your own denial. The real betrayal doesn't begin with her manipulation. It begins with your hunger for affection untempered by wisdom. It begins with the part of you that would rather be comforted by illusion than awakened by reality. The most dangerous lies are not the ones she tells you, but the ones you tell yourself to keep her close. You convince yourself she'll change, that her disrespect was just a bad day, that your intuition is just insecurity, but deep down, you know, you feel the subtle corrosion. You sense the dissonance between her words and your peace, yet still, you stay, not because you're blind, but because you crave to be seen so badly you'll endure blindness to get it. This desire, to be chosen, desired, validated, becomes a drug, and like any drug, it dulls your perception. You stop questioning what doesn't align. You stop listening to the quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't right." You confuse attraction with alignment, chemistry with compatibility, chaos with passion, and so, when beauty walks in, truth quietly walks out, and by the time you realize what you've traded, you've already built a future on a fantasy. This is not an attack on women. This is a mirror held up to the masculine soul, because when you elevate your desire above your discernment, you make yourself easy to conquer. You surrender your kingdom for a kiss. You sell your birthright for momentary closeness, and the saddest part is that no one takes it from you. You give it away willingly, not because she forced you, but because you refuse to see, because love without clarity is not love, it's worship, and anything you worship blindly will eventually destroy you. The real tragedy isn't that such women walk among us, it's that most men are unwilling to remove the veil. They don't want to see clearly because clarity demands action. And action requires loss, so instead, they romanticize their downfall. They confuse lust for loyalty and call it fate. They take the ache of abandonment and drench it in daydreams, convincing themselves that their suffering is some noble proof of devotion. But a man who is destined to lead cannot afford such illusions. He does not build altars to women who sabotage his focus. He does not offer his soul to those who only admired his light so they could snuff it out. The sovereign man does not stumble blindly into entanglement. He studies. He listens not to her words, but to the silences between them. He understands that not every spark is worth chasing, that not every thrill is sacred, that fire, when undirected, can burn empires to ash, and so he measures her not by how much she desires him, but by how she handles his boundaries, his ambition, his stillness. Does she try to harness him for her emotional cravings, or does she walk beside him without distorting the path? Because when a man steps into sovereignty, he no longer asks the world for permission to lead. He no longer sacrifices his clarity for comfort, nor dilutes his mission for the illusion of connection. He stops pursuing women who glitter and begins attracting women who align. He doesn't ask, "Does she complete me?" because he is already whole. Instead, he asks, "Can she respect the direction of my life without needing to rewrite it?" And most critically, he sees through the tactic of becoming the center. He recognizes that the woman who insists on being your everything is quietly preparing to make you nothing. She will not walk beside you. She will reshape the journey to orbit around her. And once you give up that center of gravity, you vanish, not all at once, but gradually. Your purpose fades into her approval. Your vision erodes in the name of keeping her close. And by the time you wake up, you're no longer a king. You're just a man serving someone else's storyline. The right woman does not drain you to feel alive. She does not draw warmth from your fire only to leave you cold. She arrives already lit from within, with a flame forged in her own becoming. She does not confuse independence with rebellion. She honors the rhythm of your leadership not by submission, but through synergy. She does not crave attention like oxygen. Her presence speaks louder than her voice, and her strength is not in volume, but in her unwavering stillness. She is not threatened by your throne. She protects its perimeter because she values what it represents: order, vision, and earned power. Yet if your nervous system is wired to chase chaos, you won't recognize her arrival as a gift. You'll mistake it for absence. You'll flinch at her calm. You'll misinterpret her balance as distance, because when you've only known love through instability, peace feels unfamiliar. It feels like silence, not harmony. But her silence isn't apathy. It's wisdom that doesn't perform. It's grace that doesn't need approval to remain grounded. She doesn't show up to fill your cracks. She reflects them. She's not the balm for your brokenness. She is the mirror that reveals where healing is still needed. And if you haven't faced the storms within, you'll blame her for the thunder you carry, because until you know yourself deeply, until you've unraveled your own illusions, every honest woman will feel like friction, not because she is harsh, but because she does not indulge your fantasy. This is where philosophy becomes survival. Without self-inquiry, you walk blind. Without discernment, you dress danger in affection and call it destiny. Clarity isn't cold, it's sacred armor. In a world that weaponizes emotion and romanticizes confusion, it is your clearest thinking that keeps you whole. And clarity is not given, it is earned. Earned through the discipline of solitude, through the silence of self-reflection, through the brutal honesty of asking, am I chasing validation? Or am I living in alignment? Machiavelli never told men to avoid love. He told them to understand the cost of every alliance, to weigh every connection not by intensity but by consequence, because what feels good in the moment may cost you everything in the end. And once you give power away for comfort, you lose the authority to shape your fate. Not every embrace is sanctuary. Some are snares dressed as safety. Some smiles carry leashes. Some declarations of love are quiet bids for dominance. A man who knows himself doesn't resist love, he refines it. He does not chase passion that erodes his discipline. He doesn't surrender to emotion that contradicts his mission. He doesn't ask, does she desire me? He asks, can her presence coexist with my purpose? True masculinity isn't the rejection of emotion, it's the stewardship of it. It's not the absence of connection, it's the elevation of it. It's knowing that love, at its highest, does not scatter your focus, it sharpens it, but only when it's real, only when it's aligned, only when it meets your standards without manipulation. So guard your temple, protect your direction, trust what your silence tells you when the world screams otherwise, because the market won't save you, the culture won't warn you, and the songs they sing won't speak of your downfall. They'll sell your story as entertainment while you bleed behind closed doors. Choose like your future depends on it, because it does, and remember, it's not cruelty to walk away from what confuses your spirit, it's wisdom. You are not obligated to welcome everyone into your sanctuary. Sovereignty is not selfishness, it is sacred preservation, and the man who learns this truth does not merely survive love, he masters it.